So don't let them steal your light. Don't let them break your stride. There's light on the other side. You'll see all the rain clouds follow me. It's a revolution. Gonna make you out tonight. It's a revolution.
Hi everyone, welcome back to Women in Athletics. Today with me I have Michael Haumesser. He has been a strength and conditioning coach as well as personal trainer since 2014. His experience has been working with youth to professional athletes, Olympic caliber athletes, business professionals, novice gym goers, experienced weightlifters, and everyone in between. He graduated from Eastern Michigan University in 2016 with a Bachelor in Science and majored in Sports Performance and Fitness Entrepreneurship. And Mike is a certified strength and conditioning coach through the accredited International Sport Science Association. So thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, so talk a little bit about how you initially got started with figure skaters.
So the sports performance company that I worked for in Michigan, they had a facility inside an ice rink, and there was a predominantly ice dance and a little bit of single skaters there. And so I worked with almost all of the teams that were skating there.
What was your experience working with those types of athletes?
It was very, very unique. I had never, starting out, I had never had any experience working with figure skaters. I actually knew very little about the sport. But I mean, basically being completely submersed in it for 4 years or so, I learned that they're extremely hardworking athletes. They're practicing 4 to 6 hours a day on top of off ice or any other type of training that they're doing. It was unique because of the fact of how much they were training. So I had to there was never a real plan. I mean, there was a plan, but you had to be able to move with their schedule, move with, the ever-changing schedule, really. Sometimes, we were set to work out at noon and they had to do 3 other lessons. Stuff got moved around, so we had to move it back. So that means their energy level is lower, or they're, coming to me for a workout having not eaten in a few hours. So I have to kind of change the game plan a little bit. So it definitely kept me on my toes.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like figure skating is definitely a unique sport in itself, just because of the way practices and competitions are structured, and definitely a bit different than your typical all-American sports.
Yeah, there's structure, but there's also no structure. Because obviously what you're doing on ice has precedence to any off ice stuff, which may or may not be optimal. But it seems like that's, the sport is kind of entrenched in that idea. Unlike, football, you have your practice at this time, your or your group practice at this time, your scale practice at this time, your weightlifting is, you know, in the morning, and then you're seeing you're doing your prehab, rehab after practice. Like it's like laid out like that. Whereas, I mean, what I experienced working with figure skaters, it was just like, you know, I might be practicing from 6 a.m. to noon, but you know, that might change as soon as I walk into the rink. So just kind of being flexible allowed me to, I think, have some success with the figure skaters that I had.
Nice. What were the most common issues that you would either see or overhear that a lot of the skaters were going through?
What type of issues?
Let's start off with nutrition.
Well, a lot of times they were underfueled, to say the least. I think there was for some athletes, they're being told 3 or 4 different things as far as how to fuel their body. Just from my experience in being around the skaters and their coaches, the coaches told them one thing that, in my opinion, wasn't necessarily optimal for the type of sport that you do. Then, you know, they come see me and I'm telling them, you know, you have to fuel your body. You have to eat carbohydrates. You have to eat a lot of protein in order to, you know, maintain some sort of muscle mass. And then their parents are saying another thing, or, you know, some other coach is telling them another thing, and, you know, what are they supposed to believe?
Yeah, and I think a good thing to point out is that when you're saying that what their coaches were telling them was against what you were, you know, thinking, that's to say that your way of thinking was backed by a 4-year education. So you had the understanding of what were the correct ways to fuel the body. It's not just you had an opinion that was contradictory to the coach. It was you were the certified professional in that case. And yet still the coach's parents' opinion was outweighing yours.
Right. And I mean, I'm not a dietitian or, you know, a certified nutritionist or anything like that, but I've been studying health, fitness, and everything related to that for over 10, 12 years now. So I feel like I have the knowledge to at least guide somebody in the right direction. I'm not going to be able to like lay out a full-on nutrition plan for you, but you know, I can give you good pointers that are going to kind of lead you in the right direction. Or I can, you know, a lot of strength coaches have connections with nutritionists, and they can connect that athlete to someone that is actually certified in laying out a full nutrition plan. And, you know, when I was working with this sports performance company, we did have a nutritionist on staff. And, you know, yeah, you had to pay a little extra to consult with the nutritionist, but we had a few younger female athletes that were working with her, with the nutritionist. And I mean, they became best friends. Like, they were hanging out outside of, you know, their whether or not that was, I mean, that's on the nutritionist to, you know, create that relationship. But I mean, this young girl, I mean, ended up looking up to the nutritionist as like a role model. She, like, pretty much, from what I got out of it, she pretty much changed her life.
Wow.
So for the better.
So how many of the female athletes do you think actually went to see the nutritionist?
I would say maybe two, and they weren't even like the highest level skaters. They were like um like young novice skaters.
Interesting. Well, at least the younger skaters were getting some help so that they didn't create bad habits throughout their careers. But I
Yeah.
wonder why the higher athletes didn't go. If it was because the nutritionist wasn't affiliated with US figure skating and maybe they didn't have enough like belief in the nutritionist, but still I feel like having someone like that within your building of the ice rink that's there every single day, I mean, that's such an amazing resource to have. And I can't
Yeah.
even imagine why. I mean, if you're already paying for the sports performance company to train you, why not just also while you're there see the nutritionist? That's really shocking.
Yeah. Well, she wasn't necessarily there, but all I had to do was make a call, and she could come to the rink and meet with whoever wanted to meet with her.
Interesting. Did you see any more long-term detrimental effects of the nutrition that the athletes were eating on their performance, on their physique and whatnot?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't necessarily like long term, as in multiple years, but I mean, even just in like a few months, some of the female athletes that I worked with that were prescribed diets by coaches, um, you know, told me how they're lacking a lot of energy to get through the day. I mean, how are you supposed to have an optimal on ice practice for multiple hours and sustain like high quality output without being properly fueled?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I don't know either. I mean, I remember when I was going through this, I call it my awkward diet phase. At first, I felt really great. I lost a lot of weight. And I mean, I remember doing the first run through of that season, and I was like, that was so easy. And then it just drastically dropped. I mean, each program was so truly difficult for me to get through, and I would finish and I'd be like standing on my knees and just like completely winded. And I didn't know what was happening. I was like, why suddenly is everything so complicated? And
Right.
throughout the season, I think I was just so malnourished that I would go to Panera and I would get the giant baguette and I would sit in Panera and eat the entire baguette before practice, just because I was trying to get something into my body. Because in my mind, if I ate the whole baguette, my run through was going to be easier. If I got the giant mac and cheese from Panera, my run through was going to be easier, which of course it doesn't work like that, like right away. But I was just pulling at everything because I didn't know what was happening inside my body, how my nutrition was affecting me more than just, oh, I had dropped, 15 pounds.
Yeah. Yeah. I wonder, I was actually talking to a colleague about this, like this exact situation. And they were like, if that was me, like I would go and eat a cheeseburger before practice just to have energy.
Yeah.
And it like makes me think like how many athletes, how many skaters actually like really did that. And you just said how before practice, if you didn't go and eat a bunch of carbs, that your practice was going to hinder from that.
Yeah. And it was just so crazy. And I mean, that type of behavior, I feel like can eventually either lead to like binge eating or a bunch of other problems, or, those girls that truly, they can't find any carbs around them. They're like so against eating carbs. I mean, at some point, like your body's just gonna give out on you, whether it's, you know, maybe like a fracture, stress fracture, your bone mineral density has declined drastically, you're just more prone to injuries on the ice, off the ice. I mean, it's such a tumbling effect where I feel like a lot of athletes aren't educated and don't realize how much the entire system of the body relies on what you're putting inside as fuel, especially when you're an elite athlete training, you know, 30, 40 hours a week.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a big difference between just, you know, a general population person that, you know, goes to the gym a couple times a week and, you know, sits on their butt on a computer working at a desk for 6 hours a day. That person doesn't need the carbohydrates that an athlete needs when they, like you said, are training on the ice for 4 to 6 hours and then are hopefully doing some form of resistance training along with that 2-3 times a week. You're just gonna dig yourself into a hole if you aren't properly fueling yourself. The comparison I like to make is, you know, if you have a Lamborghini, you know, one of the fastest cars in the world, it just doesn't go anywhere without any gas. And your gas, if you want to be a fast Lamborghini, you got to put that high octane fuel in it. And the high octane fuel is quality carbohydrates, you know, sweet potatoes, fruits, good vegetables, and lots of high quality protein.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point that you made, is to emphasize not all carbs are going to be your best friend for this. I mean, by saying eat carbs to fuel your body, it's not like go eat a cheeseburger, don't eat an entire baguette, don't eat mac and cheese. It's finding good quality carbs, like vegetables have carbs in them, a lot of people don't realize. Maybe if you really need a bar, like find a bar, but there's so many other, like you said, sweet potato, great natural sources of carbs that you can fuel your body with that are gonna, again, give you that energy, but they are good ingredients for you.
Yeah. And, you know, at the same time, you don't want to have a bad relationship with food. And, you know, sometimes you're in a pinch and all you can do is run to the vending machine and get a granola bar. You know, obviously, you know, may not be the best option, or, you know, a freaking Pop-Tart or something, but it's better than not eating at all.
Yeah.
Just because you think it's going to make you fat.
Yeah. And I think that's one point that I'm really trying to get through with this Women in Athletics series, is that when you're an elite athlete, anyone, you are fueling your body for optimal performance. That is your main goal. If you need to drop some weight in order to be a better athlete, then that's what needs to happen. Nutrition wise, you should only be fueling your body for optimal performance. If you want to focus on your physique, then being an elite athlete is not for you. That's not the goal of being an elite athlete. It's to place well,
Right.
to do well in your competition. So I think
Right.
there's just a misconception, or the emphasis is not on the right thing, which should just be optimal performance in this case.
Right. Yep. You hit it on the head.
So talk a little bit about if you felt like the athletes had some misconceptions about strength and conditioning, if some of them didn't like to come to work out with you, and what that was like.
Well, I feel like a lot of the athletes knew that it was something that had to be done. There was a lot of them that like they knew they had to do it, but didn't want to do it.
Was had to be done more so like our coach is telling us we have to be here, or we have to do this in order to become better athletes? Because I feel like those two are very different things.
Yeah, they are different. I would say a little bit of both, depending on their level of the older skaters. I feel like knew that if they wanted to push to the next level, that they had to incorporate some form of strength training, some type of sports performance training. The, younger, junior and younger, I think they were just kind of told, this is what you have to do by the coaches, or hopefully, and there were some of them that actually really enjoyed it and, wanted to work out.
Did you have any communication with the coaches about their athletes, or did it kind of feel like you were just doing everything on your own and the coach dealt with the on-ice stuff?
Yeah. So if I could go back and do it again, that would definitely be something I tried to be more on top of. I did have communication with some of the like assistant coaches or whatever you want to call them, but I did not have the greatest communication with the main coach at the rink. And there was a lot of factors that kind of led to that. But yeah, I feel like I could have done a better job trying to communicate to the head coach. She did a decent job at, telling athletes that you need to go and train off ice. But there was a lag in knowing when the athlete was ramping up their, if they were doing like multiple run-throughs or they were ramping up in their on-ice training. I obviously don't want to be ramping up in their off-ice training as well, or they're going to like crash in a month. So had to go off of what the athlete was saying. And a lot of times the athlete didn't really know. They're doing what the coach is telling them to do. They don't really understand the kind of like periodization of the on ice and the off ice.
Yeah, that's another thing I wanted to mention is that at least for us, there was no set plan. It wasn't like the coach sat us down and was like, here is the year and like periodization. We're going to break it up into like mesocycles, and like this is how we're going to ramp up for this competition, and then we're going to have a little taper week. This is how we're going to progress you so that you are at your optimal performance during nationals or worlds or whatever it is that you want to do. But combining that with a strength coach and saying, how can we work together so that we both know what's happening to help our athletes out the best? I mean, from what I know, no other school does that either. And
in every other sport, that does happen. In every collegiate sport, the head coach of the sport, the head strength coach, the athletic trainer, they're all collaborating to make sure that they're all on the same page to peak their athlete, their team at the right time.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, like you said, figure skating seems to kind of not be there with that. And it's hard because a lot of skating schools, or whatever you want to say, they don't have like their official strength coach. Like there's, Team USA has their strength coach at, in Colorado Springs, but you have to be in Colorado Springs in order to be able to have that person available to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, from my experience, the way that our coach would structure our on-ice training was based on whatever they had presented to us at like Champs Camp or whatnot, because I remember there being a little chart and it explaining how you had to increase your intensity maybe 2 weeks out of your competition, 3 weeks out, then the week before you decrease your intensity, then you have a competition, and that's automatically going to make you at your top level for that competition. But I don't think the coach actually understood how that worked and why that was happening, or how to personalize it, because that just meant everyone was going to do quad run throughs 2 weeks out of a competition, everyone was going to do one run through right before the competition week. No one does run throughs and so on. So there was no, it also, figure skating is so difficult because you have a club of maybe, let's say 10, 15, 20 athletes that you are in charge of. And then especially in ice dance, you have two people paired up. Even within that one pair, those two people could need completely different things. And yet both of them have to perform the same thing, the same run throughs. You can't do a run through without another person. So that's a whole different thing in itself, where you can't really individualize it like you would for single skating. You have to try and find the happy compromise. And I remember when I was skating, my partner and I, we both didn't really do well with quad run throughs. It was not helpful for us. We just felt exhausted, completely fatigued. The quality was lacking, and we couldn't build back up that stamina in time for the competition. So we both would kind of be like, you know, if the coach isn't looking, we're just going to do 2 run throughs. Not because we're lazy, but because that's what works best for us. But I mean, if we were with a coach, they'd be like, you're doing a quad because it's quad week. There was no, we don't feel like it's the best thing for our bodies. That's, oh, you're being lazy. You might as well just leave it, because I don't want that type of mentality here.
Right. Yeah, and that's not physically and mentally healthy for an athlete. So I have a question for you as a successful skater. How old were you when you first did any form of resistance training?
Ooh, good question. So I remember first starting out when I moved to Washington, D.C. So I think I was around 11 or 12. And originally it was just our skating coach that would hold on certain days little sessions, and he would make us do, I think it was like push-ups, dips on chairs, jump roping, maybe some sit-ups, like all that type of stuff. And he'd usually make us run around the parking lot of the rink for half an hour, 45 minutes before skating, before run-throughs. So you're coming into practice already just demolished. So that was like the unofficial introduction. And then throughout my time there, in the rink, also upstairs, there was a gym, and a new sports performance company moved in, and we started working with them. And that was more so when I started learning about like TRX, like weights, different forms of like agility training. And I think that was a really great first introduction. I don't really remember a lot about the specifics, but we would all work out together, and seemed like everyone was very keen on it. And the one thing I remember was that I would be able to lift the same amount of weight as the boys. And I was like, oh, I'm so strong, I'm so good. So each session I'd come into the gym and I'd be like, oh, you're picking up the 25s to like curl, I'm going to do the 25s too. So that was
so you gained confidence.
Yeah, I've always, I don't know when it stemmed, but I always felt very competitive in the gym. And I think when my body started changing and I started growing more muscle, I liked the way I looked, and I liked how empowered I felt, which is something that I still is my favorite thing about going to the gym. I feel so empowered when I see the progress in my body, when I see that I can deadlift 165 pounds, that I can bench, whatever weight. Like, it is incredible that your body can do this. So the gym for me is always my happy place. And that's why it was so just, I couldn't understand the mentality of other athletes when they're, an elite athlete, you understand that you're coming to the gym to improve your fitness. It's not, I'm burning off calories, I'm going to do a goblet squat with 10 pounds so I don't get bulky quads. That's not the science of it. And if that's the way you think, then go up to the coach, do your own research from credible sources, and see, why do you get bulky quads? That's usually power lifters that are on testosterone or something else. I mean, you as a figure skater
lifting 6 days a week and are eating massive amounts of food.
Like, that is their main goal. What we do in the gym to supplement your on ice work is not going to completely change your body. And the changes that you do see are only beneficial. They're not going against what you're doing. It's supplementational. It goes hand in hand in order for you to be the best that you can be.
Right. Yeah. And I think you brought up a good point. I think one of the overlooked aspects of resistance training or working out in general is like the mental part of it, is like the overcoming an obstacle, the challenging yourself to be better, and actually becoming a better person, becoming a better athlete. I think that's overlooked by a lot of people, both athletes and not. And everybody can benefit from, having a stronger belief in themselves.
Yeah. Like, working out in the gym is, I mean, yes, it's there to make you a better athlete, and it's going to make you stronger, more powerful, more agile, whatever your focus is. But I mean, in my education of kinesiology, I took a sport and exercise psychology class, and it truly just made me understand that exercise is so much more to the body than the physical components. I mean, it affects you mentally in so many different ways. I mean, exercise can treat depression in some cases, even just as well or better than medication. I mean, self-esteem, self-efficacy, most mental issues can be decreased with exercise. So I mean, I don't see how it can be perceived as a bad thing. It's the backbone of your entire being. It's the spine to your life. I mean, you cannot function without exercise, without moving your body, without and I mean, if we were to say that figure skaters on the ice get their exercise and that's going to heighten them mentally, when you're on the ice, I feel like that is your work. You are so focused, and a lot of the times, especially in ice dance, you have another person, maybe you're bickering with them, maybe the coach is yelling at you. I feel like that's not the space where I feel like I'm being enlightened. I'm feeling all the positive effects of exercise. Maybe physiologically, my body's adapting, my heart's getting stronger, my muscles are getting stronger, but mentally, I feel like that is where I'm like this. I'm just on edge. I'm there to work. I'm there to do my job. But when you find that outside source of happiness, for me, it was the gym. That was where I could let go of all my issues, and I would just focus on my form. I would just focus on the weight I'm lifting, what I'm there to do. And that's when I would leave the gym and I was like, I just feel so much better. Like, I don't remember what I was even stressing about before.
Yeah, it's a really good point. So you started, or you were introduced to strength training, resistance training pretty young.
Yeah.
When did you see, or how long until you started to see your performance on the ice change?
I think that's a difficult question, because throughout that time, that wasn't the only like one. It's not like everything else was stable, and that was the one changing component. Because
okay, so I'll rephrase it then. While you were training, did you ever correlate resistance training to a decrease in your performance?
No, never. Yeah. And I think my performance definitely increased when I moved to Michigan. Of course, I was working with one of the best figure skating coaches in the world, but I also started working with an incredible strength and conditioning coach who ultimately was the motivation for me to pursue kinesiology, because I just loved the way I felt in the gym there. That's where I felt like I was thriving, and it made me understand that this was the path that I wanted to pursue. So in that sense, I might be able to say that during my time there, if I, just had the ice, maybe I wouldn't have done as well. If I just had the strength coach and a bad figure skating coach, I wouldn't have done as well. But I think it's just have a nice circle. You can't just have one great figure skating coach and be like, he's going to be my everything, and not have a nutritionist, not have a sports psychologist, not have a strength and conditioning coach. They're all united. They're all going to work together to make you the best athlete. You can't just rely on one to get you all the way there.
Yeah.
So I want to talk a little bit, I don't know if you would be able to put in your opinion, but if we talk about the female triad, it's usually eating disorders, which cause menstrual disturbances, which can cause bone mineral loss. And a lot of women don't realize that they, aside from being an athlete, should do strength training just to strengthen their bones, because women are more predisposed to those issues. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I mean, strength training does, aside from strengthening your muscles and your tendons, it actually makes your bones more dense, which in turns makes you more durable from breaking a bone or, avoiding injury.
Did any of the figure skaters ever get, a really unexpected injury, or they had a fall and then this great big injury came afterwards where it was like, that fall shouldn't have ended up in such an injury?
Not that I can think of off the top of my head, but I can only imagine that happens very frequent, especially, if the athlete is underfed, and then, overtraining potentially. You're just kind of stacking the odds against you, really, of getting hurt seriously.
Yeah. And I know now 2 athletes that they have been just out for a run as part of conditioning and tripped or, twisted their ankle, and it ended up resulting in a stress fracture. And it could be that you just happen to fall a certain way that was the result. But in my mind, I feel as though if you are a healthy individual who is fueling your body properly, strength training, taking care of yourself, a fall or a trip from a run should not ever result in a stress fracture.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that.
So as we're wrapping this chat up, can you please bust the myth for us one last time?
The myth that female athletes get bulky if they resistance train?
Yes, please take it away.
So most figure skaters that I worked with trained 2 to maximally 3 times a week. 3 to 4 is optimal, but a lot of times they only have 2 to 3 hours a week to devote to off-ice resistance training. And females specifically cannot produce the amount of testosterone in order to become bulky. And only resistance training, we'll say 1 to 3 times a week, will not elicit that effect in your body. Resistance training, especially in women, will increase growth hormone production. Growth hormone production is great for increasing your metabolism and burning fat, which is what all female skaters seem to want to do. So that would definitely be a good reason to resistance train. Now, over a course of a year or 2 years, there will, without a doubt, be some muscle mass gained. And, that should be the goal, is to gain some muscle mass, because again, you're just building a more resilient body. And as an athlete, if you're hurt all the time, you're not on the ice. If you're not on the ice, you're not getting better. And if you're not getting better, you're probably not standing on the podium. So with that being said, I think that female athletes should not worry about becoming bulky.
And within that, you said a great point that hurting all the time is not normal. Your body should not hurt every day that you wake up. You should not put your skates on and be like, I know I'm going to be in pain and I'm going to just take some Advil or not focus on it. If that's the case, then even your strength and conditioning coach can help you figure out why the pain is occurring and maybe help incorporate some exercises for that.
Yeah. Well, as an athlete, as someone that is challenging their body every day, whether you're a 6-year-old kid or an elite, 20, 25-year-old athlete, bumps, bruises, sometimes breaking things, that's one thing. But we should never be, I shouldn't say never, but we shouldn't be dealing with soft tissue injuries as much as we do see. We shouldn't be seeing torn Achilles, torn ACLs, MCL, meniscus injuries, labrum injuries as much as we do. And a lot of that can be prevented. I'm not going to say it's going to completely stop you from ever tearing your ACL or something like that, or tearing a pec, or, tearing a hamstring, but it can greatly improve your chances. Strength resistance training can greatly improve your chances from those things happening.
Yeah. And a lot of times those types of almost chronic injuries are caused by overtraining, overreaching. So that's also, if you feel like that may be the case in your situation, you're constantly injured, it might be beneficial to speak to your figure skating coach, your strength and conditioning coach, and have them build you a better plan, because strength and conditioning coaches do have that as part of their education. They know the signs of overtraining, they know periodization, how to prevent that from happening. So even though they are not your on-ice coach, they can help your on-ice coach build you a program to help prevent that from happening. And I think, again, going back to what we said before, that's a big thing that's lacking in figure skating.
Yeah. Yeah. And the overtraining, that can, not to go off on a whole other thing, but we're seeing specialization in sport younger and younger. And kids, like 10-year-old kids, are becoming overtrained. And that's because they are skating 4 to 6 hours a day, every single day for years. They're doing the same type of movements every single day, over and over and over again. And those movements, if I just did a shoulder press for hundreds of times every day, my right shoulder eventually is going to wear out. Okay. So now if you take that and you apply it to the knees and the hips and the ankles and the lower back, and they're constantly in these same positions over and over and over and over again, now we have these soft tissue injuries in teenage kids that should never be happening. And I'm not saying to not skate, but taking time to try a different sport, try something else other than skating for a month or two as a young athlete, as a young kid, as a child, isn't going to set you back as much as you may think, or as much as your parents think, or as much as your coaches say is going to set you back. If anything, it might actually improve you as an athlete, because if you go from skating to gymnastics, we'll say, you're using your body in a completely different way. You're using different muscles. You're gaining proprioception in ways that you would have never done on the ice. And then when you come back to skating, even if it's a month later, you're going to be a better athlete because of that. So that's just something that I feel like a lot of strength coaches these days think about, and a lot of parents don't think about.
Yes. You took my example of gymnastics. I was going to say, I think I had a unique background going into figure skating because when I was really young, I was doing ballroom dancing, Latin dancing, ballet. I started with acrobatic gymnastics. I then went into rhythmic gymnastics. I was doing single skating, ice dancing, synchronized skating. And the mentality of my mom was not to build me into the best athlete in all of those. It was, I have too much energy in the house, so let's just tire her out outside of the house. And then as it ended up being, I was pretty good at all of them. So I ended up specializing in figure skating when I was 10, going on 11. For, 6-7 years before that, I was a very well-rounded athlete. And I would say that all of those other sports gave me a big advantage in being a figure skater because I was able to use my flexibility from gymnastics, my balance from gymnastics, my coordination and proprioception from ballet, understanding what my limbs look out away from me, how to hold my
exactly
posture, my my movement from dancing, ballroom dancing. I mean, it all comes together. And that's, now you're seeing like 13-year-old girls doing triples, and it's like, why? Your body, you haven't even gone through a growth spurt, you haven't gone through your period. Your body isn't going to be able to perform the same things later on. What you're doing is just overtraining yourself, exhausting yourself before you even have the chance to understand what the rest of your career can be. So if you were to say one last thing for girls that are watching this video, what would be your advice?
My advice, don't be afraid to see where you can take yourself. With strength training, like we hit on before, yes, a lot of it is about improving your body and how you perform, but improving your mind also can go a long way with performance, and gaining confidence in yourself to know that you can overcome a difficult task in a different manner than finishing a program. I think can go a long way with just having a stronger belief in yourself. And like I said before, I think that's an overlooked aspect of strength training, and I think a lot of young women can really benefit from that.
Great. Well, thank you so much for taking the time and talking with me. And I hope that our chat can help educate other girls about strength training.
And if they do have any questions, I'm completely open to answering any questions that they have. And if they don't if they're not comfortable coming to me, I know plenty of female strength coaches that would be just as open to answering any questions as long as, or as I'm sure you would be able to answer a lot of those questions.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you again.
Yeah, thanks for having me.